Today we're going to look at box and whisker plots, and yesterday we went over central tendency, which is our mean, median, mode, and range, and I told you that we were going to spend one day on it just as a quick refresher because we were going to need it for our lesson today, and we are going to need that for our box and whisker plots. But first we're going to look at what is a box and whisker plot. A box and whisker plot is a graph that allows us to see the spread of the data. It lets us see which way the data tends to lean. Now, if you look at these different companies, you can see that some are more spread out than others. So what they did was they gathered the number of stocks sold in the thousands and they based them on each company. So now you can see that company D is really spread out. It's really far apart, whereas company A is really close together. We can see that company B leans more to the left, whereas company C leans more to the right. And we're going to talk about more about what each one of these means and how spread out or which way it leans and what that has to do with us. But today we're just looking at all the different pieces. A box and whisker plot has a lot of different pieces, but it's really not too bad once you get used to it. But it is going to have a lot of new vocabulary words. So today we're going to look mainly over our vocabulary words and our different parts and identifying those. And then tomorrow we'll start in with the how to actually build the box and whisker plot. So let's look at our pieces. Well, you can tell our name comes from this top right here, and it's pretty self-explanatory. You have this box, which is a bluish gray color, and then you have the whiskers that go out to the side. Easy. But let's talk about these vocab words on the bottom. Now, you see down here where we have our min and our max. Let's think about what we did yesterday. We did our mean, median, mode, and range. And one of the first things we had to do before we could find our median or our range was we had to put our numbers in order from least to greatest. And we talked about how our range was the biggest from the smallest. So our smallest would be our minimum, and our biggest would be our maximum. So one thing you'll know about a box and whisker plot is it's always going to be put in order from least to greatest before you can build it. That way you can identify your min and your max. Another word you should recognize on here is our median. And that's just like we did yesterday. It's the median of the data. So once you put it in order from least to greatest, you're going to find your median. Now, we also have our lower quartile and our upper quartile, and those are completely new words this year, and we're going to go over what they mean in just a minute. I also want you to notice that they have abbreviations for Q1, Q2, and Q3. I will be using those later on just because it's a whole lot easier to talk about Q1 than having to write out or say lower quartile, upper quartile, and things like that. The first thing we're going to look at is the whiskers, and same thing as like a cat. The whiskers stick out off to the side, and that's what they do here. We have our box in the middle, and the whiskers are going to stick out to the side. So whiskers are the lines that connect to the box to the minimum and maximum values in the data set. So it's these lines that stick out that go to our minimum, and they stick out and go to our maximum. Next, we have our box, which is comprised of the upper and lower quartile and the median of the data set. Okay, easy, self-explanatory. This gray thing in the middle is the box. It looks like a box. But the important thing to notice here that the bottom of the box is going to be right here with our lower quartile. The top of the box is going to be our upper quartile, and that'll be really important tomorrow, and so we really need to focus on that. Okay, so we were just talking about our box, and we talked about how it was made up of the lower quartile, the median, and then the upper quartile. And even though they has all this complicated vocabulary words, they're really not that bad. Every time you see a box and whisker plot, I want you to think middle, 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 because that is the easiest way I can explain a box and whisker plot. Now, let's talk about our specific words. Median, or our Q2, is the middle of the entire data set. So, just like we did yesterday, if you have a data set, Goes from here to here. You're going to mark them off until you find our median, which is going to be in the very middle. Then we have our lower quartile. The lower quartile is the middle of the bottom half of the data set. So our lower quartile is the middle of the bottom half. So this over here on my left side is the bottom half. So the middle of that is somewhere right here. And so that would be our Q1 or our lower quartile. Then we have our upper quartile, and our upper quartile is the middle of the top half or the right side of the data set. So our upper quartile is the middle of the top or right side of the data set. So I have to find the middle of the top half. Well, the middle of the top half is about right here, and that would be our Q3. And so once we have that, we have all our lines that we need to do our box with. So you just take your thing and you draw in your box. And it is that simple. There's my box, and if you look, it just makes your box and whisker plot, because there's your box, here's your whiskers, box and whisker. Okay, so let's go over what we know about a box and whisker plot so far. We know we have two whiskers in a box. Our first whisker goes from our minimum over to our box, whereas our second whisker goes from our maximum to our box. So we have our min and our max that make up our whiskers. Then we have our box here in the middle, and that is made up of our lower quartile, our median, and our upper quartile. And we talked about how our median is the thing you find first. It is the median of the entire data set, just like we did yesterday. Then our lower quartile is the median of the bottom half. So you're going to find the middle of the bottom half of numbers, and then you're going to do the same thing on the top for upper quartile. So you're going to find the median of the top half of numbers to give you our upper quartile or Q3. Okay. Now, one thing that we know about a box and whisker plot is that it's used for analyzing the spread. And we talked about that in our first slide about how it's our analyzing the spread and which way it kind of leans. Now, in order for us to look at that more closely, we have to kind of dissect or look at each piece of the box and whisker plot. So one of the ways that we do that is looking at our ranges. Now, there are two different ranges that you can have. We have our range, which is just like the one we did yesterday, and that is the difference between the minimum and maximum values. But today I'm going to give you a new word, and that is interquartile range. Okay, now I want you to notice a word in here, and it says interquartile. The word I want you to notice in here is quartile. And we know that our quartile is made up of the box, okay? So we're just looking at the box right now. And so the interquartile range is the difference between the upper and lower quartiles, or the range of the box. So the range is the max minus the min, whereas the interquartile is Q3 minus Q1. So my range is the range of the whiskers, and my interquartile range is the range of the box. The easiest way to think about this is range is biggest from smallest. We already know that. And the interquartile has the word quartile in it, and that is your clue that you're finding the range of the quartiles or the box. Okay, so for today's assignment, you are going to have to answer questions about a box and whisker plot. And so we're going to work this one together, and then I'm going to let you try it on your own. But I kind of want to go over it and talk about everything we've done today because I know it's a lot. So we have our vocabulary words that we've talked about. We have minimum, maximum, median, lower quartile, upper quartile, range, and interquartile range. I'm going to start from the beginning and work my way back. Now, minimum. Minimum is a word you've heard before, and we know that means the least or the smallest amount you can get away with. So, My minimum number is I'm going to go all the way to the left because that's less. And right above my dot for the minimum is 65. So that means for my minimum, it's going to be 65. I'm sorry. Try that again. 65. Okay. So then I have to go over to my maximum, and that's going to be my very top number. So I'm going to go this very last dot, and that's easy to see. It falls right under 100. So on my maximum, I'm going to write 100. Then I have to go to my median, and just like we did yesterday, our median is our middle number. So I look for my very middle dot, and that's this one right here, and it is right under 80. So I'm just going to put 80. Next, I have my lower quartile. Remember, we also sometimes call my lower quartile Q1. So where would Q1 or my lower quartile be? That's going to be right here at the front of my box, because remember that lower is on the lower end of the box. So I'm looking at this dot right here, and what number does it fall under? Good, it falls under 70. Now, I have to do my upper quartile, and remember we sometimes call that Q3. And since it's my upper quartile, that means it goes on the upper part of the box or on the right side of my box. And so if I look at that, the right side of my box falls evenly under 90. So I'm just going to fill that in here. Now, that's all of my easy stuff that just happens that I can figure out from looking at a graph. Now I'm going to have to figure out my range and my interquartile range. Now, remember, range is the one that we've been doing. It's the easy one. It's just the biggest number minus the smallest number. So, we said my maximum was 100 and my minimum was 65. And I'm not going to have enough room here, so I'm going to come up to the top. 100 minus 65. And I can't take 5 away from 0, so I'm going to borrow from this 10 and make it a 9. That makes this a 10. 10 minus 5 is 5, and 9 minus 6 is 3. So my range of the entire problem is 35. But now it wants my interquartile range, keyword being quartile. And that tells me I'm looking at my quartiles. And my quartiles are what make up my box. So I'm going to have to take Q3 and subtract Q1. So take my upper and subtract my lower. So my upper was 90. My lower is 70. If I subtract those two, 90 minus 70 is going to give me 20. So my interquartile range is 20. Really, that's as simple as it gets. It's not going to get any harder today. I am going to have an assignment for you to work on. It's just a couple questions like this. I am going to allow you to work with a partner today. But whatever you don't get finished is homework. So make sure you stay on task and do what you're supposed to do. If you have any questions, just let me know.